An Ideal Family by Katherine Mansfield. Welcome to MagicMingle, where we help you learn English through captivating stories from classic literature. In today's episode, we'll be exploring An Ideal Family by Katherine Mansfield, a touching story about aging, family dynamics, and the passage of time. In An Ideal Family, we follow the life of Mr. Neave, a successful businessman who is admired by his family and community. From the outside, he appears to have the perfect life, a devoted family, wealth, and status. However, as the story unfolds, we discover that Mr. Neave feels increasingly disconnected from the youthful energy of his family and struggles with the idea of stepping back from his business. His children, particularly his son Harold, want him to retire and enjoy his later years, but Mr. Neave fears that without him, the business will crumble. As he walks home, he reflects on how he no longer fits into the vibrant world of his family, feeling left behind by the very life he built for them. This story beautifully explores themes of aging, the loss of control, and the contrast between how others perceive us and how we perceive ourselves. Mansfield captures Mr. Neave's inner conflict and the bittersweet realization that life continues to move forward, even as he feels left behind. Stay with us till the end as we explore the emotional depth of An Ideal Family, while helping you improve your English comprehension through this timeless story. Let's dive in together and discover the meaning behind this beautifully crafted tale. That evening, for the first time in his life, as Mr. Neave pushed through the swing door and stepped down the broad stone steps onto the sidewalk, he realized he was too old for spring. Spring, warm, eager, full of life, was all around him in the golden evening light. It was like she was waiting for him, ready to greet him, to blow playfully into his white beard and tug sweetly on his arm. But he couldn't meet her this time. No, he couldn't pretend to stride forward, confident and jaunty like a young man. He was tired. Even though the late sun was still shining, he felt oddly cold and numb all over. For the first time, he didn't have the energy or the will to keep up with the season's lively spirit. It overwhelmed him. He longed to stop, to wave away all the brightness and bustle with his cane and say, "Go on without me." Suddenly, it was a great effort just to greet people as he usually did, tipping his hat to the familiar faces of friends, acquaintances, shopkeepers, postmen, and drivers. The cheerful look that used to accompany his gesture, the playful twinkle in his eye that seemed to say, "I can keep up with any of you," was something old Mr. Neave couldn't manage anymore. He walked slowly, lifting his knees as though he were trudging through water, with the crowd moving swiftly past him. The trams clanked by, carts rattled, and cabs rolled along, all with the carefree, dreamlike indifference one often experiences in sleep. It had been an ordinary day at the office. Nothing special had happened. Harold hadn't come back from lunch until nearly 4. Where had he been? What had he been doing? He didn't bother explaining, and Mr. Neave didn't ask. He had been in the vestibule, seeing a visitor out, when Harold strolled in, as impeccably dressed as always, cool and charming, wearing that little half-smile women seem to love. Yes, Harold was too handsome for his own good. That had been the problem all along. No man should have eyes like his, with those long lashes, and lips that seemed almost unnatural. His mother, his sisters, and even the servants treated him like a young god. They adored Harold and forgave him everything. Even when he'd stolen his mother's purse at 13, taken the money, and hidden the purse in the cook's room. Old Mr. Neave tapped his cane sharply against the curb as he remembered. But it wasn't just his family who spoiled Harold, everyone else did too. All he had to do was look and smile, and people would practically fall at his feet. So maybe it wasn't surprising that Harold expected the office to fall in line as well. But that wasn't how business worked. Not even a well-established, successful business could survive without dedication. Either you put your heart and soul into it, or it would fall apart right before your eyes. Yet Charlotte and the girls were always pressuring him to hand the business over to Harold, to retire and enjoy himself. Enjoy himself. Old Mr. Neave paused under a row of old palm trees outside the government buildings. The evening wind shook the dark leaves, making them rustle like they were laughing at him. Sitting at home, twiddling his thumbs, while his life's work slowly slipped through Harold's fingers. Harold, who would smile all the while like everything was just fine. "Why are you so stubborn, father?" his daughters would say. "There's no reason for you to keep going to the office. People are starting to say you look tired. You have this big house and garden. Why can't you enjoy it for a change? Or take up a hobby?" And then Lola, the youngest, always had to add, "All men should have hobbies. It's unbearable if they don't." Well, well. A grim smile crossed old Mr. Neave's face as he slowly climbed the hill that led to Harcourt Avenue. Where would Lola and her sisters be if he had spent his life pursuing hobbies? Hobbies couldn't pay for their fancy townhouse, the seaside bungalow, their horses, golf, or the 60-guinea gramophone they loved to dance to. Not that he begrudged them these things. They were smart, attractive girls, and Charlotte was a remarkable woman. It was only natural that they enjoyed the high life. No other family in town entertained as much as they did, and no house was as popular as theirs. Time and again, Mr. Neave had listened to his guests complimenting his wife, his daughters, and even him, as he offered them cigars in the smoking room. "You've got the perfect family, sir," they would say. "It's like something out of a book or a play." "Well, well, my boy," Mr. Neave would reply. "Try one of those cigars. I think you'll enjoy it. And if you want to smoke outside, you'll likely find the girls on the lawn." People often said the reason the girls hadn't married was because they had too much fun at home. They could have married anyone, but they were too happy with each other and with Charlotte. Maybe that was true. By now, Mr. Neave had walked the length of fashionable Harcourt Avenue and reached their corner house. The carriage gates were open, and there were fresh wheel tracks on the driveway. He stood facing the large white house with its open windows, the sheer curtains blowing gently in the breeze, and blue vases filled with hyacinths on the wide window ledges. The hydrangeas by the carriage porch, famous throughout the town, were beginning to bloom. The pink and blue clusters of flowers seemed to glow among the green leaves. Somehow, as he stood there, old Mr. Neave felt like the house, the flowers, and even the fresh wheel marks were all saying, This is a house full of youth. Girls live here." The hall was as it always was, dimly lit, with wraps, parasols, and gloves scattered across the oak chests. From the music room, he could hear the piano, the notes fast, loud, and impatient. Voices floated out from the drawing room. "And did they have ice cream?" he heard Charlotte ask. The rocker she was sitting in creaked. "Ice cream!" Ethel exclaimed. "Mother, you wouldn't believe how bad it was. Only 2 flavors, and one of them was some cheap strawberry ice with a soggy paper cup. The food was terrible overall," said Marian. "Well, it's a bit early for ice cream," Charlotte said in her usual easygoing manner. "But if you're going to serve it, you should at least do it properly," Ethel began. "Oh, of course, darling," Charlotte agreed, her voice soft. Suddenly, the door to the music room flew open, and Lola burst out. She gasped, almost screaming when she saw her father standing there. "Father, you scared me. When did you get home? Where's Charles to help you with your coat?" Her cheeks were flushed from playing the piano, her eyes sparkling, and her hair had fallen across her forehead. She was breathing as though she had just run through the dark and was startled. Old Mr. Neave stared at her. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time. Was this really Lola? But she wasn't waiting for him. She'd already forgotten he was even there. Now, she was nervously chewing the corner of her handkerchief. Just then, the telephone rang. With a cry that sounded almost like a sob, Lola dashed past him and disappeared into the phone room, slamming the door behind her. At the same moment, Charlotte called out, "Is that you, Father?" "You look tired again," Charlotte said with concern, stopping her rocking chair to offer him her warm cheek for a kiss. Ethel gave his beard a quick peck, and Marian brushed her lips against his ear. "Did you walk home, Father?" Charlotte asked. "Yes, I walked," he replied, sinking into one of the large armchairs in the drawing room. "But why didn't you take a cab?" Ethel asked. "There are so many around at that time of day. If Father wants to tire himself out, I don't see why it's any of our business," Marian said sharply. "Children, children," Charlotte soothed. But Marian wasn't done. "No, Mother, you spoil Father, and it's not right. You should be stricter with him. He's been very naughty," she laughed, her voice harsh and loud as she patted her hair in the mirror. It was strange. When she was a little girl, she had spoken so softly, with a slight stutter. Now everything she said, whether it was, "Pass the jam, please," or something else, sounded like she was performing on stage. "Did Harold leave the office before you?" Charlotte asked, starting to rock again. "I'm not sure," Mr. Neave replied. "I didn't see him after 4. He said," Charlotte began, but Ethel interrupted. "There. That's what I mean, Mother. Yellow with touches of silver. Don't you agree?" she asked, showing Charlotte a page from a magazine. "Give it to me, dear," said Charlotte, reaching for her tortoiseshell glasses. She gave the page a light tap with her finger and pursed her lips. "Very pretty," she said absently, peeking over her glasses at Ethel. "But I wouldn't add the train." "Not the train," Ethel exclaimed, horrified. But the train is the whole point. Let me see. Marian snatched the magazine from her mother playfully. I agree with mother. The train is too much. Old Mr. Neave, forgotten, slumped further into his chair and felt himself starting to doze. He was exhausted. Even Charlotte and the girls were too much for him tonight. They were too much. And in the back of his mind, he saw a little shriveled old man climbing endless flights of stairs. Who was he? I don't think I'll change for dinner tonight, he mumbled. What did you say, father? Oh, I said I'm not going to dress for dinner. But we've got guests coming. Lucille, Henry Davenport, and Mrs. Teddy Walker. It'll seem strange if you're not dressed for dinner. Aren't you feeling well? You don't have to do anything, father. That's what Charles is for. But if you're really not up to it. Charlotte hesitated. Fine. Old Mr. Neave grumbled, getting up and heading toward his dressing room. Charles, the young servant, was waiting for him there, carefully tucking a towel around the hot water can. Charles had been a favorite of Mr. Neave's ever since he was a little red-faced boy tending to the fires. Old Mr. Neave lowered himself into the lounge chair by the window, stretched his legs, and made his usual evening joke. Dress me up, Charles. Charles, frowning with concentration, stepped forward to remove Mr. Neave's tie pin. H.M. Well. It was pleasant by the open window, very pleasant. The evening was mild and quiet. He could hear the mower softly humming as someone cut the grass on the tennis court below. Soon the girls would start their tennis parties again. And at that thought, he seemed to hear Marian's voice calling, "Good shot, partner. Well done, partner. Oh, very nice." Then Charlotte's voice, calling from the veranda, "Where's Harold?" And Ethel replying, "He's not here, mother." And Charlotte's vague, "He said." Old Mr. Neave sighed, stood up, and took the comb from Charles to straighten his white beard himself. Charles handed him a folded handkerchief, his watch, and his spectacles. "That'll do, lad," Mr. Neave said, and as the door closed, he sank back into his chair alone. And now, in his mind, that little old man was climbing down the stairs toward a bright, cheerful dining room. His legs were thin, like a spider's, frail and tired. "You have the perfect family, sir. The perfect family." But if that was true, why was he all alone? Why didn't Charlotte or the girls stop him? Where was Harold? It was no use expecting anything from Harold. The old Spider-Man kept climbing down, past the dining room, past the porch, the dark driveway, heading back to the office. Stop him, someone. Stop him. Mr. Neave woke with a start. It was dark in his dressing room now, the window glowing faintly in the dusk. How long had he been asleep? He listened, but the sounds of the house, the voices, the laughter, seemed far away. Had he been forgotten? What did any of this, Charlotte, the girls, Harold, have to do with him? They felt like strangers. Life had passed him by. Charlotte wasn't his wife. His wife. A dark porch, draped in a sorrowful vine. Small, warm arms wrapped around his neck. A pale little face looking up at him. A voice whispered, "Goodbye, my love." Goodbye? Why had she said goodbye? There must have been a mistake. That pale girl was his wife. The rest of his life had just been a dream. The door opened, and Charles stood there in the light, calling out like a soldier, "Dinner is served, sir." I'm coming, Mr. Neave replied.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, and share our channel Magic Mingle with your friends to enjoy more magical stories.